Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and today it is time to get spooky once again because we played Devotion, the follow-up from Red Candle Games, makers of Game of the Year 2019, I believe, Detention? 2019 or 2018?
19 sounds right.
One of our Game of the Year winners. What is time? And so we are diving back into spooky Taiwanese horror games. And joining me on this journey, as always, Pete Busby. Hello, Pete.
Hey, what's going on? I thought because things are spooky today, we'd go with something a little bit more light and fun. Not all my animal fun facts are. But this one is about the yellow-billed oxpecker. Already a fun name.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. So these are one of those birds that eats like parasites off larger animals. So like zebras, hippos, giraffes, that kind of thing.
Ox?
Yeah, I assume some sort of oxen. I assume that's how they got the name. But scientists recently, let me check the date on this article. Scientists 2 years ago found out that these oxpeckers actually roost in the armpits, leg pits, limb pits of giraffes in the night. So as many as 7 birds will all be basically hanging off this giraffe at night, just, sleeping in its armpits.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's heartwarming. It's cute.
Do they nest there too?
No, so they leave to go back to trees when it's time to lay eggs. You can't really lay an egg in a giraffe's armpit.
Not if you don't try.
Yeah, that's a good point. These lazy, good-for-nothing birds. But other than that, they're basically just hanging out on these giraffes all the time.
And the giraffes are cool with it, I guess, or can't do anything about it.
Yeah, right? You can't really, swat at your own armpit if you're a giraffe. But, the birds eat their parasites, so I would be willing to trade that if I were them.
Yeah, some hippos let birds just hang out in their mouths.
Yeah, same with crocodiles, too, right?
So
yeah.
I guess armpit less invasive than mouth.
Yeah, I'd take it. It's a good trade as far as I'm concerned.
All right, and that other voice you heard is the mistress of games, M. Palladino. Hello, M.
Haha, hello. I'm not usually a spooky game player, but this one was spooky, and I had to play it, so I guess I am now. I don't like scary games.
Noted
but
coward, M. Palladino.
Yeah. If you want to see me being scared of this game, which only has 4 jump scares, you can watch it on my Twitch at GameMakerM, where the full VOD is.
Yeah, I only played the first part of this game on Twitch because I just wanted to have a in-depth, quiet experience with my headphones on. And let me tell you, I was playing this game with my headphones on first thing in the morning because I had woken up first. Mm-hmm. And then my significant other just walked up to me and grabbed me on the shoulder with no announcement.
No.
Mid playing this game. And I just said, that's not cool. Don't do that. And she was like, "What? Well, you weren't responding." I was like, "Yeah, I had my headphones on, and I was playing this spooky game." She's like, "Oh, it's spooky?" I'm like, "Yeah, it is." And grabbing me on the shoulder while I'm playing it, not cool, but it's okay. We work through our differences.
That's good. When the first jump scare happened, I was like, "Oh no, this is a scary game," and then my girlfriend was like, "I will turn the lights off for you." And I was like, don't you fucking dare.
Oh, let me set the mood. Would you like moans?
Yeah.
Yes, this
we'll
was strictly
knock on the walls a little bit just in case you're not scared enough.
This was strictly a daytime game for me.
Yeah. It should have been, but it wasn't. My sleep schedule is messed up.
Well, before we get into Devotion, we have our normal housekeeping. Reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. And I want to make a call out for anyone who would like to reach out, let us know. Right now we've got our Patreon set to any amount will get you access to our Discord. We'll have the Discord report in just a second, but that is the only tier we have. Basically $1 and up gets you access to the Discord and, gives you access to the hosts and other members of the community on a more regular basis. But I would like to hear from folks, like, what sort of things would you want to see on the Patreon if we did more? Would you like to see exclusive streams, or perhaps some sort of more regular game night? Or would you like to pick games that we play on some way that we wouldn't do it every single dang time? Because you got to plan for, lots of people doing that if you make that an option. But like, what sort of things would you want to see? Because we've been doing this now for a few years with the Patreon, and we have not solicited feedback in a while. So feel free to write in at deeplistenspod, deeplisten.libsyn.com, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Any of those places will allow you to leave feedback. Or you can leave it on our YouTube videos if that's how you're watching these. I do check the comments on those because we have to delete comments from weird creeps. So I mentioned it earlier. Em, why don't we head over to the Discord report?
The Discord report. Boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. This week on the Discord report, E3 is happening.
Oh,
in
yeah.
case you weren't aware. It sounds like it's a banger of an E3 this time around. Not really.
Banger's one way to describe it.
What's the second E in E3?
The Electronic Entertainment Expo.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's what I figured.
Yep. E3 has been on my Twitter, but I couldn't honestly tell you what's going on at it. Is there
I watched
anything
a few
noteworthy?
press conferences. I watched the Square one. I watched some of the the Devolver Digital one, some of the Gearbox one, a little bit of the Xbox. Square sure was disappointing. I mean, all of them are kind of disappointing, unfortunately.
I mean, this is probably the fallout of COVID developments, which I don't know why anyone was expecting anything out of this one, but it was particularly sad this time around.
Yeah, and E3 has been just shrinking and shrinking before our eyes the last few years. I think they canceled it last year, and honestly, that was the right decision because E3 is completely worthless at this point. Like, all of these companies have big enough media arms at this point that they could just get their message out when they want, how they want. So they don't actually need a single expo the way that they used to. And so with everyone already on Twitch, and a lot of these companies do their announcements on their own schedule at this point, they don't necessarily schedule it around E3 the way they used to. I don't know what purpose E3 serves, but if this year was kind of making the argument for how E3 might look going forward, it wasn't great. Like, some of the announcements that jumped out to me. Em, have you seen any of the new Final Fantasy Origins?
Oh, yeah. How could I miss all of the memes about the guy in a t-shirt ranting about chaos? That's the one, right? That's not a different Final Fantasy?
He's wearing a t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers, and he's got a giant stupid sword, and he's fighting against monsters in full armor.
Yep. It's very, if you play Final Fantasy XIV and you're casual glam in cutscenes, that's kind of what it looks like. They had to issue a press release that was like, that's not what he's going to be wearing the whole time. Please stop making fun of us.
Yeah, this is...
After it dropped, the Square Enix North America Twitter locked itself.
Good call.
Which is probably a good idea, because people were ruthless.
Yeah, so this is the Tetsuya Nomura-led game after kind of giving Final Fantasy 16 to the 14 team. So, you got all your Nomura stuff. You got characters that are over-designed and yet somehow look terrible. The story, I mean, they did an interview with Nomura about the game, and he said that he wanted to make a Final Fantasy game about an angry man. Finally.
Wow. Groundbreaking.
Finally. Pete, they're going to make a video game about an angry man.
I mean, I'm glad to see that we're finally getting some gender equality in our video games, Been too long the men have been shut out.
Yeah, my favorite Final Fantasy Origins memes are the ones that have photoshopped the main character with the title card, with like the art for the name of the game onto a PS2 game case, because it looks like a PS2 Devil May Cry game in a lot of ways. So that got announced and was disappointing. There was some Guardians of the Galaxy stuff that looked pretty solid.
There was like 30 minutes of Guardians of the Galaxy stuff.
Yeah, in your 45-minute press conference, you don't generally want 30 minutes of one game. But it was the only game that they had new stuff to show, kinda. They announced that they will be bringing Final Fantasies 1 through 6 to the PC.
Brand new graphics.
But pixel art, because they got the feedback that people didn't like what they did to those games the last time they released them on mobile, so this time they're doing it with pixel art. But not the same pixel art that the games originally had. Like, they're doing extra work, which it seems to me like this can only make people mad. I don't know.
It seems to have already had that effect.
Yes.
Which, it looks a lot better than the Steam versions that were released a while ago. So at least there's that. But, there are ways to play Super Nintendo games now. We could just replay it that way. We don't have to
pay for it a fifth time or whatever.
Yeah, fifth, sixth, how many times now? I mean,
the thing that was befuddling to me was the fact that it's coming out on Steam and mobile, but not any modern consoles. That just seemed odd, considering the last time these games have been playable on I guess some of them are available, I think, on Switch, but you can't play Final Fantasy VI on a PS4 or PS5 because I think its last release was on PS3 on their online system. So, like, there's a hankering to play these old games. They can clearly sell them to people again. It was odd. A lot of odd choices there. Devolver's press conference was interesting.
What did they do? I didn't see anything about that one.
Their whole bit was that they were doing a fake premium subscription model for their company. Devolver Premium Max Plus, I think is what they called it. It was a $0 subscription service that then had a series of purchasable upgrades that you could make once you have subscribed, such as $60 games. So get it, like, the subscription's free, but then all the games are regular price.
Haha, got 'em.
But they sold a bunch of weird merch with it, like a Devolver suit, like an actual suit, for $500.
I don't think that, like, your press conference at what's supposed to be a major gaming expo should be like the moment for satire.
Well,
yeah, is that fake?
No, you can buy that suit.
Is it a good-looking suit?
I mean, it's like pinkish purple because their logo is, and then it's got their name on the back.
I mean, that could be neat.
The back, not the lining, the back.
Oh, that's weird.
If it was in the lining, that would be, more excusable. $500 for a suit is not cheap for a gag. And then they had another gag where they made a VHS tape of the conference, and they recorded it on VHS, and it's the only VHS that has their whole press conference. And they called it a non-fuckwithable tape, an NFT that there will only ever be one of, and the sole owner of the non-fuckwithable tape will have it, and they ripped the tab off so that you can't tape over it or copy it.
I'm totally out on NFTs.
Yeah.
Jokes or otherwise.
Out as in you don't know what they are, or out as in fuck them?
Out as in fuck. It's just another mechanism for money laundering, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
It's
super bad for the environment.
It's not even super good for money laundering.
Yeah. I looked up the suit. It is terrible. This is a very purple suit.
It is. So the non-fuckwithable tape they sold for $1,000, and it sold immediately.
Great. Good for that person.
They donated it. They donated the money, so you don't have to be mad about it.
Okay. I'm less mad.
They announced some cool games, though. Like, do you have the site up right now?
The
Devolver
site?
Digital.
I mean, I could definitely...
Let me see if I can find their Max Plus. They've got a page just called Propaganda on their website.
I'm like, this is all of a set. Like, I'm getting a good idea for who this company is.
Oh, yeah, we've played Devolver Digital games before. They made Loop Hero. Or they published Loop Hero, I should say. So one game that looked pretty good was Demon Throttle. It's physical release only for the Switch, and it looked like a throwback kind of bullet hell 2-player thing, which was cool. Inscription looked cool. It was a PC, Steam, card card-based deck building game, but horror. So that looked pretty interesting. It had a very interesting graphical style.
A horror card game?
Yes.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and it's like it looked like deck building, like your Monster Trains or your Slays the Spire.
Mm-hmm.
But had a very interesting art style. I couldn't make out the systems that well because it was such a quick trailer, and it was just a trailer, no gameplay, or no direct gameplay. There was also Wizard with a Gun, which looked...
Hell yeah. Now that's a name of a game.
Yes.
Is the title an accurate description of what the game is?
It's a wizard and he's got a gun, yes.
Okay.
And it looked a lot like a Supergiant game in a lot of ways.
Oh.
Isometric.
It looks like Don't Starve. It's kind of got that art style.
Yep. So those all looked cool. Em, have you seen anything from E3 that jumped out at you?
I usually get the third-hand Twitter memes. So nothing terribly exciting.
Psychonauts 2's coming out in August.
We knew that was coming out, though.
But we didn't know when.
That's true.
Now we know it's in August. And guess what we're going to be playing in August?
Is there any way, like, I'm perfectly fine playing Psychonauts 2, but I'd be super stoked if me and Em could just filibuster it for a month?
Yeah.
The cat loves it.
No, not Psychonauts 2.
Not the second Psychonauts. Well, I guess third Psychonauts, because they made In the Rhombus of Ruin their VR game. And did the Twitter tell you anything else? Yeah, they made a VR game for PlayStation VR.
The Twitter has not told me anything else. Are you fishing for something?
No. I'm just asking because I don't want to serve up all the E3 hot takes.
I see. No, it was pretty underwhelming based on what everyone was saying. Nothing that I was like, oh, I gotta play that immediately.
Oh yeah, Elden Ring.
Oh yeah, of course. We forgot about Elden Ring.
Elden Ring got footage, so Pete, I don't know if you've heard of Elden Ring. Have you?
I have not.
So what if I told you the people that made Dark Souls and Demon Souls teamed up with George R.R. Martin to make a video game?
I would check out immediately. I might give up on video games entirely to avoid playing it.
Is that actually George R.R. Martin's involved? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the joke.
Uh-huh.
That's why people were like, that game's never coming out.
I get it. You see, I was missing that crucial detail.
That game doesn't exist.
It looked cool.
Yeah, it looked like a Dark Souls game.
Yeah.
But the people talked slightly more, which I guess that's the George R.R. Martin touch.
A little bit more writing.
So, like, on a scale of, like, 1 to all of it, how much incest will there be?
Hard to say.
It's gonna be, I don't know. A lot of characters don't seem like they're related to each other, so it'd be hard for them to fit incest in there. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a, like, item description that implies that incest happened.
Oh, most definitely.
That's a Dark Souls thing to do.
They always put in the item descriptions.
Huh, this weapon's called the Incest Bedpost. That's weird.
Odd.
Oh well. Better not think about that. So yeah, that game looked pretty interesting. We also found out that there's going to be a director's cut of Kojima's latest Epic PS4
Jesus.
game.
Oh,
Death
no,
Stranding.
Not Death Stranding. Oh, fuck.
It's getting a Snyder cut.
Great. I mean, didn't Kojima make his own game studio just so he didn't have to, like, cut things? And then, he got bought by Sony? I'm being told he got bought by Sony, and that's why he can't actually just do whatever he wants.
Well, let's just say maybe the least edited game developer that gets to work with AAA budgets said, finally I can have my vision realized for this just gigantic, ponderous game that was very divisive, largely because the gameplay was weird and the story was weirder.
Great. Awesome.
So
Looking
cool.
forward to 90 hours of nothing happening.
The main character's last name is Bridges because he's trying to build connections between people.
Games are art, you know?
Yep.
People say they aren't, but...
God damn it. How can we make jokes about games when they're parodying themselves now?
What if I told you he was also the son of the president?
No.
God damn it. I'm not going to tell you more. These are the things that I know. There's also a baby. These are the things that I know about Death Stranding. Ask me anything about Death Stranding. All right, so that I think will cover our E3 coverage for right now. Jeff Keighley's game kickoff thing was very weird. There were so many skin announcements. Just like people coming in telling you about how there's a brand new Nier Automata skin in Fall Guys. That's a real thing that happened. That got a trailer on an E3 press conference.
Hold on. Okay. Are the Fall Guys dressed up like 2B?
Yep, 2B is a bean. 2bean.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I can't even... It's hard to make jokes about any of this.
No. It's self-parody. It's self-parody. Like, they had on the Overwatch people, and the Overwatch people were explaining how Overwatch 2 is like, they had to redo all the characters, but then you looked at the characters, and it was truly just, they looked the same. I don't know. That game will be fine.
Overwatch 2 is never coming out. I'm calling it now. That was a fake thing that they pulled out of their ass to avoid talking about, I think it was
StarCraft.
China?
Oh, okay.
I think it was because Blizzard got into some trouble because they censored some Chinese players at a big tournament. And they were like, oh crap, we gotta do something quick. Overwatch 2. And then we didn't hear anything else about it. We had one trailer.
I'm never going to have a smoother transition than this. Speaking of games that were censored in Taiwan and China and big kerfluffles, let's talk about Devotion.
Expertly done.
So Devotion, I picked this game, so I'm going to tell you about it. I take the burden this time. Devotion is a horror game, a first-person horror game from the makers of Detention, Red Candle Games. They are a Taiwanese game developer. It had quite a rocky release, let's say. It is now available on Red Candle Games' own proprietary store, and we will get into the why in a little bit. In the game, you play as, and I apologize in advance for my pronunciation, I don't speak any type of Chinese. None of the different dialects, none of the languages, so I'm going to try my best here. You play as Du Fengyu, and he is a screenwriter who is trapped in some sort of apartment complex in Taipei, just wandering through the ghosts of his past, basically. He is married to his wife, Gong Li Fang, and they care for their daughter, Du Mei Xin. And so you are kind of walking through this apartment over and over again, different kind of time periods, to get a sense of what happened to Du Fengyu and his family. So with that, you do not play horror games that much, correct?
Not if I can help it.
Okay. What did you think of kind of the initial setup of this game? Like the initial...
It was very PT. Like, you start the game sitting in front of a TV, which is playing a recording, and you are, like, stuck in one spot. It seems like your wife is in the next room talking about how she's making dinner. It seems fairly normal. And then you start to have, like, flashes, and things get a little bit weird. And then you have to do the, standard get up, walk into the next room, realize no one is there, turn around, and then there is a spooky thing behind you.
Yep.
Yeah, which is my favorite thing. If you go back and watch the VOD of me playing this, I think I say something to the effect of, oh no, it's one of these games. And then it, like, starts to come towards you in this long hallway, and then you, like, probably do what I do and go, oh no, look away, and then it charges at you because that's the standard thing for games like this. So immediately I was like, okay, we're doing this.
Have I ever told the story of the time when that happened to me in real life?
What?
Something stared at me from across a long expanse and then charged at me?
What the fuck?
Oh yeah, I was at Universal Studios, I think, Disney World, and I wanted to get to the Simpsons land, but it was close to Halloween, so they still had their, whatever, Island of Terror or whatever they call their, like, Halloween stuff up. So the shortest way to get to Simpsons World from the entrance was to cut through this fucking, like, poorly lit, tree-covered kind of walkway. And then they just had people dressed up in spooky stuff hanging out there, including one person on stilts wearing what I could only describe as like a Scream outfit, like a mask and a cloak.
Mm-hmm.
And he just locked eyes with me and just stood there, deadly silent and completely still, and then charged at me at full speed, and then stopped directly in front of me and just looked in my face.
And what did you do?
Yeah.
I said, "No, thank you, sir."
I will not
best
have what
thing
you are
of ghosts.
serving. Thank you.
No, thank you. And then he did that to me again when I left.
The problem is you made eye contact, which we all know means you have engaged in a fight.
I mean, the
Correct.
mistake was I was
Rules.
alone. That was the mistake.
Why were you alone at...
It was a whole thing.
Gotcha.
Can't go into why I was alone at Six Flags
Okay.
at Universal Studios, but yes.
That's a different scary thing they do every year.
I really didn't expect it. That was the thing. And let me say, this game nails the experience. Nails it.
Oh, yeah.
You
You're like, I hope that thing doesn't charge towards me, and then it does.
know what I'll say about the opening? This reminded me, there's like this very famous speech where Kurt Vonnegut is describing story structures, and he's basically like describing two, where there's the fairy tale where everything starts off terrible and then gets great. Then there's like the Greek tragedy where things start off okay and then just get worse and worse and worse. And the second I saw, I was like, oh, this is a nice, pleasant night at home with my family. Let's see how this becomes horrible as quickly as possible. We can
It's
just
very
sense
fast.
the drop off was coming. Yeah, it's quick. Like, it doesn't leave you waiting.
No. And for anyone who's wondering why we're talking about the game instead of the controversy first, I want to talk about the game first. Like, the controversy surrounding Devotion, we'll get into it later, but I think that the game deserves to be discussed as a work of art instead, before we talk about what happened to make it hard to play for a long time. So once you get started, you're kind of walking around this apartment, like you said, there's kind of a PT experience here, where you're going through the same space repeatedly, with changes happening over time. It also, I think, draws a little bit from a game we played and hated, Silent Hill 4: The Room, except it took the good lessons from that game.
They were good lessons.
Well, the good lessons were the part where you were in the room were pretty creepy and pretty tense. All the parts where you left the room sucked shit.
Wait, Silent Hill, the room is not entirely in a room?
No, you start locked in an apartment, and then you find a hole in your wall, and you crawl through it, and then once you crawl through it, it's like a Silent Hill level.
The majority of the game's not in the room.
That's false advertising.
The room is creepy, though. Like, the room, you're in first person, you're wandering around this apartment, and stuff is awry. And that was enough. Like, oh, there's a weird stain on this wall that looks like a face. I don't like that. Or like, hey, there's a creepy hole behind that just like appeared above my toilet. That's not cool. Or stuff gets haunted in your room and it starts floating. You don't like that. But then all the parts where you need to go to like a Silent Hill town and then fight monsters with a pipe, those parts sucked. And then eventually they make it so that when you're in the room, you just like don't heal anymore and you take damage randomly. Like a lot of the fiddly mechanical decisions they made that suck. This game just says to hell with all of it. The whole thing is the room. You're just stuck in this space that's unsettling and hostile towards you. So kind of the first setting that we see, I think happens pretty quickly. You are just kind of in an abandoned apartment and you leave. Then you kind of get your first jump scare and walk to the door of another apartment. You open it and you're in the first apartment again, except now it's empty. It looks like it's move-in day. And we kind of get the sense that we're experiencing this room over multiple time periods. So what did you take from kind of the housewarming party section?
Parties get instantly creepier when there aren't people there. So
Yeah.
like, the way it's set up is there are a whole bunch of chairs. And I forget if the chairs move at this point or if they move later.
They move when you
It's
get near
this
them.
point. Yeah.
That's it. Okay. So the chairs move when you get near them, and they almost sort of like seem to follow you around the room. But you're just hearing the ambient noises of a party without anybody actually there, which is super disturbing. I feel like it's worse to hear disembodied ambient noises of revelry than it would be like screams and shaking chains.
Yeah, I would say that is fair. Like, you see all of the accoutrement of a party, no one's there. Like, you see a chicken partially prepped in the kitchen. There's candles and things strewn about the room for like a housewarming ceremony. And at this point, like, you start picking up little hints of like what were the cultural rituals that were going on here, who were these characters. Like, you start picking up, I think, screenplays or parts of screenplays that the main character wrote. And for the most part, I didn't find this section to be that haunted. we don't start seeing problems at this point.
No. Yeah, there's not that much, like, there will be a lot of marital discord soon, but at least at first there doesn't seem to be that much. Do we ever find out, though, how they got together in the first place?
No.
Okay.
No, we don't know how Du Fengyu and Gong Li Fang got together.
Yeah, because she seems too good for him, right?
Yeah, I was wondering that for a good portion of this game, because he seems like kind of an asshole, and she seems like she could do way better.
Yeah, she's a movie star.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like one of those Hollywood, they met on the set sort of deals. He's a screenwriter, and she starred in movies and did songs.
Like a Britney, Kevin Federline sort of deal?
Yes, exactly like stars of the stage and screen. Britney Spears and Kevin Federline. Yeah, so I think at this point the only tension we start to see is that Gong Li Fang is made to leave her career to be a housewife. And there's some tension there. I forget what the time period is where we go into the house and there's a bunch of dolls, human-sized dolls just hanging around in the room.
Yeah, that one was fun. I wanted to talk about that one.
That's probably the creepiest moment of the whole game. That's another turnaround moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's 85 or 86. So the game takes place in kind of three time periods, 1980, 85, and 86. I think that one's 85.
Yeah. This one is another classic of horror where there are fake people and you look at them and they seem fine and then you look away and then they move. So they start like all sitting in their respective spots and then you have to go into the kitchen and then you come back out and then they've gotten up and they're looking at you. And then you have to go into your daughter's room and they all gather around in the doorway after you do something in there.
Yep. And yes, just a reminder, folks, we will probably spoil this whole game. So if you want to check out Devotion, please do so. It's a cool game. You can get it on Red Candle Games website at this point, and it's DRM free. But yeah, that moment, I mean, it always works, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Inanimate objects moving without you looking at them, and then they're looking at you.
It definitely does. And they were all in the doorway, too, like just crowded around. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at this point, we start getting one of the sources of tension, which is Du Mei Xin, the daughter of this couple, has some sort of respiratory illness. She has a hard time breathing, and all of the family members are kind of concerned. Like the mother and the father are both very concerned about what's going on with her. And I believe that's why you need to go into her bedroom. Is something related to that. So you kind of keep. I think there's one other section where you jump ahead a little bit. Yeah, you meet Du Mei Xin's representation, which is a creepy porcelain doll with a messed up eye.
Another classic. Love to see it.
And she's sick, which means the doll moves when you don't want it to. And when you initially find it, it's pinned down with syringes, and you have to pull the syringes out.
This game really does play all the hits, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
But dang, they're hits for a reason.
Have either of you played Resident Evil 8 yet?
I have not.
Okay, well, there's some creepy doll and syringes and stuff in there. It hits all the same notes.
Is that the one with the very tall vampire lady?
Yes.
Okay.
You might have seen her.
I've seen her. I have not played the game, but I have seen it.
I have not played it. I've watched it being played on Twitch. If you want to see some creepy dolls, either this game or that one, you will be sufficiently scared of any porcelain figure you come across.
Finally, something making me dread porcelain figures.
Yeah, just in case you wanted a phobia.
Yeah, so we find out that the syringes are there because this daughter had to go through acupuncture, so they punched it up a little bit. They also you find x-rays, or kind of torn up x-rays, that when you assemble them together, it's a clean x-ray, and you kind of have to then angle the x-ray to line it up with the daughter in a picture to let you know, it was of her. And so we find out here that medically nothing seems to be wrong with Du Mei Xin. Nothing physical seems to be wrong.
Yeah, it seems to be psychosomatic.
Yes. And at this point, a doctor recommends that Du Fengyu take his daughter to a psychiatrist, but he then gets a phone call from a mentor Heiyu, who says that she can cure this girl. And by mentor, it's implied that this is a religious leader of some kind, and this is where kind of one of the central tensions of the game arises. So, Pete, why don't you kind of go into what's going on here with the psychosis?
Sure. So he's basically spending all his money on faith healing, right? Mm-hmm. So there's another part, just to sort of put context around the illness. There's a scene at another portion of the game where you actually inhabit the daughter.
Yes.
And she's doing her homework. Or it seems like her homework. It's like multiplication tables or something. Mm-hmm. And as she's doing her homework, she starts to hear her parents yelling in the background, again, about whether or not her mother should go back to her career. Her dad's not having it, which we'll probably discuss in a second. But is that sort of the nerves, the sort of trauma of her parents arguing that seems to trigger her illness? The issue is her father can't really come to terms with it. It's like the phrase he uses, I think, is "my daughter isn't a lunatic" when he gets this note from the psychiatrist. So the issue really is he can't accept that mental illness is real illness, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he can't accept that the illness that she's facing is likely panic attacks from being around a family that is constantly fighting, just not having attention. Her dad is constantly writing screenplays that don't sell. Her mom is trying to put on her best face, but is taking care of the house and is not necessarily as involved in Dumation's life. So she's being neglected. Her parents are constantly fighting, which is raising tensions. And so the dad just cannot understand that. And so he takes her to this mentor.
Mm-hmm. He basically, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, he basically reverts to an older model of illness, right? So if you think about sort of the early days, we didn't really have mental illness as a category. It was, things like demon possession, and it was demon possession arising from your own or your parents' sins, negative actions. So that's basically what he's doing. It's a model of illness as personal failure, let's say. Like it's your fault that you're ill. And it's
personal
not
failure or spiritual failure.
I mean,
like you're not praying enough.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's a personal failure that leads to a spiritual failure. So basically that's what he's trying to do, is deal with the corruption of her soul.
Yeah, so he turns basically to this faith healer who, it would appear, cures her. She gets over her panic attacks, starts being able to sing, and Dumation wants to be a singer like her mom. So she goes on to singing competitions, she competes, and based on some of the items that you can find, it becomes clear that Du Fengyu and Gong Li Fang put a lot of stock in Dumation doing well and then taking care of the family. So like this 10-year-old winning a singing contest is going to be what finances this family, which is a lot of pressure to put on a 10-year-old.
Yeah, most definitely. The father, so I was reading this book, Department of Speculation. It's a sort of semi-famous novel that came out, might have been last year or a few years ago. But they use this phrase in the book, art monster. So the author writes this article the point she's making is basically that women don't get to be art monsters. So give up everything for the sake of their art, like forsake their whole family, their earthly responsibilities. It seems to be a lot of what the father's trying to do here with his screenwriting. He's not involved in the daughter's life. And the implication I got, at least, was that the reason she gets cured by going to the faith healer in the first place is just because her and her father get to spend time together.
Exactly. Yeah, he happened to, when she was sick, he bought her a storybook and started reading to her and spending time with her, and she starts getting better because of that. And it leads to one of the cooler sections of the game. You actually open up the storybook and play through the storybook as like a 2D platformer. Mm-hmm. And what did you think of that change of gameplay style?
It's very cute. While I was playing it, one of my roommates looked at it and was like, "What are you playing now?" I was like, "Oh, it's the same game." They were like, "Oh, it's so different." And it's just like, going through and exploring this little adventure this girl is going on to heal her sick father, which is kind of an inversion of the real world events. And it's a nice little break from, worrying about jump scares and such.
Yeah.
It's very bright, it's just solve some simple puzzles and then the story has a happy ending. And it kind of, you realize afterwards that the father bought this book for her and read it to her once, and she kind of gets drawn to it, where she thinks that if she makes a bunch of these paper flowers, like they do in the story, she will be cured, and she wants her father to help her do that. But he is too busy going all these faith healing, and spending all his money there that he doesn't even realize that his daughter probably just wants to spend time with him. Probably has some anxieties that he's not making any better.
The tulip thing is an interesting choice, too.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
If only because, Gino, you probably know this better than I do, but it has a parallel in Japanese origami where if you fold 1,000 cranes, you get either a wish granted or you get cure from illness, that sort of thing. I forget the exact tradition, but I know like there's a 1,000 cranes version of this.
I am not super familiar with that myth.
Okay. Yeah, it comes from, I think it was a girl who was sick with radiation poisoning post World War II. And like she thought, basically the idea was if she folded 1,000 cranes, she would get better. And she actually folded more than 1,000 cranes, I think, by the end. Unfortunately, she didn't get better because that's not really how it works. But it then became a tradition in Japan. It had roots before this girl started, but I think that's what popularized it in the modern time.
Yeah, I remember people used to do something similar with like little paper stars, which you could fill a whole jar with 1,000 of them.
Yeah, in 1,000 Origami Cranes is a group of 1,000 cranes held together by strings. Ancient Japanese legend promises that anyone who folds 1,000 origami cranes will be granted a wish by the gods. And it came up from Sadako Sasaki, a Japanese girl who was 2 when she was exposed to radiation from the bombing of Hiroshima during World War II. She developed leukemia and then at age 12 spent a bunch of time at the hospital and began making cranes with the goal of hitting 1,000. Oh. Okay, there's some dispute about fictionalized version of her account and what she actually did. But yeah, you were right, Pete. Right on the money.
Hey.
So, yeah, she's folding these cranes, and she's actually folding the cranes out of her dad's discarded manuscripts. So her dad, instead of taking that as a sign that he should spend more time with his daughter, he takes that as a prompt to write a screenplay based on what she did. Like, you find a screenplay that's like, and then the dad, who was very upset that his writing wasn't coming through, he found that his daughter was folding them into tulips, and rather than being angered at the child, he realized that she was taking what he discarded as garbage and turning it into something beautiful. And, I don't know, live your art, but maybe pay a little bit more attention to the metaphor that you're, like, he's paying more attention to making a neat metaphor than what that metaphor should say to him about what he should do with his child.
Yeah, it's super tragic. It really is.
Yeah, so all of these sequences, at this point, you're kind of going back and forth between these 3 time periods, and each of them you'll find a screenplay that he's written about these circumstances that are happening right in front of him that he is making worse. But he's just attentive enough to turn them into art, but not attentive enough to see them to their logical conclusions. We also see that at this point, I guess in 1986, he and his wife are completely on the outs. Like, she wants to go back to work. He says, "You'll humiliate me, basically, if you do that." So you can't. And he takes a dress that she used to wear when she was performing and cuts it up and strings it up on lights. Though that feels, like spooky heightened. Not necessarily what happened, but cutting up the dress seems to have happened. And that kind of leads to one of the big puzzles kind of at this point in the game, where you're trying to find 3 things that Dume Shin thought she needed to become a pop star.
Right. There's an interesting moment, too. I forget where this falls in the game, but you actually find a letter from your mother-in-law.
Yes.
So your wife's mother. And she actually recommends to your wife that she stay with you. Sort of the phrase she uses is, solve these bedroom problems in the bedroom. Don't let them spill out into the world. Think of your daughter. Which sort of tells you, like, sort of how ingrained this mentality might have been, even outside of your husband, who's obviously a dick.
Yeah. I mean, he's a representative of a patriarchal worldview that is pretty commonplace all around the world. Just having this woman who feels trapped, who has a bigger career than her husband, but is forced to stay inside and keep away from the spotlight because upstaging him now that they're married is taboo. But yeah, every section, like, you're kind of going between these 3 time periods, getting puzzle pieces that you'll use. You'll get one puzzle piece in one time period, jump to another one to use it. And they're kind of tied together with this central area because it's framed as 4 different rooms in the same apartment complex. So this shared space between them will propagate creepy things when you trigger certain events. Like at one point there's a merry-go-round that's in the center, and if you pick up a paper in the center, like the merry-go-round starts moving around you. The one that you mentioned, Pete, is like a mailbox that's floating in midair that you kind of open up a window and pull a letter out of. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff kind of going on in those sections. Yeah, so Dumation thinks that she needs, I think, shoes, a dress, and a crown to be a pop star. And this is another one of the big, like, pivotal pieces. There's a big cask of wine that is hanging in 1985 kitchen that is open, and you throw those 3 pieces into it. But then when you kind of arrive at the same place in 1986, the wine has fermented, and instead you find a snake on the floor that's been choked to death.
This is a reference to, you find another series of excerpts from a legend.
Yes.
Which is the legend of, what's the name of the...
Segu Guanyin.
Yeah, which involves a snake.
Yes.
The snake sacrifices itself in order to save a monk, yeah. And so it all starts to come together once you, like, see that snake on the floor of the kitchen, which is an odd thing to find, but if you've been reading the notes that you've been picking up, I wonder, I'm not sure if it's possible to get through this game without picking up certain notes. We all knew what was going on by the point where this happened, right?
Yeah. You need at least the ones, so there are some that give you a combination to open up a wardrobe later. You need at least a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you need to pick up the explanation, like the folklore of Segu Guanyin, but that's the deity that Mentor Heiyu is kind of a representative for. And the story is basically this monk starts out very diligent when he's young. He meets a snake. The snake's like, don't kill me, I'm cool. I'm a good snake. Then the monk falls sick, he falls ill. And then the snake says, you're such a diligent monk, kill me. I'm a spirit snake. If you kill me and use my body to make a medicine, you'll be healed. And then the spirit snake watches over him, takes care of other souls who are in need of healing. So that's kind of the rough outline of what's going on there. But it becomes clear, like, you see this stuff recurring. There's a shrine to this deity in the corner of the apartment in 85 and 86. It's not there, I don't think, when you move in 80. But you can kind of see this apartment change. And did either of you see what was going on with the fish in the apartment?
Oh, yeah, the fish.
Oh, God.
Well, what the fish was before the bad stuff that happens with the fish. Like, what the problem with the fish was.
What was the problem with the fish?
The problem with the fish is that fish is dumb expensive.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very expensive fish.
It's an arowana, which, if you've played Animal Crossing, is very rare.
And a red one, too.
Yeah, there's some marital issues because the father has gone out of his way to buy a very expensive fish, put it in a tank that is very small.
Yes.
It does not seem comfortable, given what I know about fish.
He got this very flashy fish, put it in a very small tank in their tiny apartment that they never invite people to.
Yeah.
And she's like, what the hell? His wife is just like, what the hell are you doing spending our money on this fish when, we both know that you're not working and that I'm not working. And then something bad happens to the fish. Who wants to say what's poor fish?
This is a upsetting portion. There is a portion, I believe it's in 85 it starts.
Yeah, it's 85, 86.
Yeah.
This is 85, I think, when she tries to run away.
Yeah. What prompts her to want to run away?
So Dumation, there's supposed to be a school field trip.
Right, yeah.
That she's supposed to go on, and she's feeling better, but she has a singing contest coming up, so instead of taking her to her field trip with her friends, they make her stay home so that she doesn't risk getting sick, and she takes this to mean, like, she was promised that she could go if she got better, and since she's better, she takes this to mean her father's a liar and should not be trusted. And she's been given medications from the actual doctor, and also like vitamins and stuff from this faith healer. And she's like, I don't believe, if they lied to me about this field trip, why should I believe them when it comes to this medicine? It never makes me any better. I know how to make myself better, and it's not this medicine. So we get one of the saddest sequences, I think, of the game. You show up and you see through the perspective of the fish in the tank.
Yeah. It's like this puppet theater thing where you're pressing buttons to tell this story where she's like, I'm going to run away, and then there's dialogue overlaid over it of them being like, she took all of her medicine, but she doesn't seem to be getting any better. Where is it going? And then you watch, like, from the fish's perspective as just pills fall around you. And then the next shot is, like, you looking at the dead fish in the tank that's broken, which, the fish didn't deserve any of that.
No. I liked that fish.
Yeah.
Chekhov's fish, that one.
If there is a fish, it will die at some
point. It will die. If there's a fish in Act 1, it will be dead by Act 3 in a horror game. But yeah, I did appreciate like the section, you're the fish, you're pressing these buttons that make Dumei Shin kind of move on tracks. It's like this porcelain doll, and it kind of does a good job of giving you a sense of how mechanized her life is, about how rote it is, because she's not allowed to leave. She wakes up every day, she watches TV, she doesn't get to go outside, her dad doesn't pay attention to her. I think that they did a nice job of kind of combining those two metaphors. You get the spooky payoff of the fish, but you also kind of get the metaphor of how rote and mechanical her life is.
Yeah. It felt very similar to one of the What Remains of Edith Finch cutaways.
Yep.
In that it's leading up to some form of death, and I think having it be from the perspective of the fish is another one of those like tricks that they probably took from something like What Remains of Edith Finch, because I don't know, it was giving me a lot of those vibes, like when one of the first ones in that game where you're playing as the little girl and then she becomes a shark, felt like that.
Yeah, or the baby.
Yeah, the baby in the bathtub.
Yep. I mean, that section's cool. Like, you also get a section where you're playing as Dumei Shin as a baby, kind of walking down a hallway, kind of showing with these big, I guess, representations of things that will come up in her life, swinging over her head like a mobile.
It's I think it's a representation of the ceremony they talked about earlier in the game, where basically it's choosing. You like spread a whole bunch of items in front of a child, and which one they pick is supposed to represent what their future career will be. And she bypasses everything to end up on a stage singing at the end.
Right. She mentions how like she enjoyed singing in this big dresser that her mom has, because she can sing how she wants to sing for herself, but her parents keep making her go on stage and she has stage fright, so she doesn't do as well and she doesn't sing the song she wants to sing. And we find out also in, I guess, 86, is it, that she didn't win the singing contest. She loses to a recurring champion by 1 point. And then her illness comes back, and this is kind of the biggest departure of the game. At this point, well, do we get the spooky chase first, or do we get the Faith Healer's apartment? I think spooky chase first.
You definitely get spooky chase before you get to like
Spirit World.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like once you kind of have to go through these 3 time periods, assemble what would you even call it? A talisman that you can use to open a locked door.
Shit, I forget the term they use in the game. Something like that.
Yeah, you get this ring of metal that you're supposed to use to unlock this door that's been locked into the present, and you start getting chased as you walk towards it by what is clearly a ghostly visage of your wife, who has been haunting you. She's been doing the jump scares for most of the game, and I stumbled into a jump scare that I think is missable at one point. I went back to the parents' room, and she was just in the doorway, just staring at me.
Did either of you get caught?
Yes, I did the first time.
What happens? Did she kill you?
Oh, she kills you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
She pushes you under red water, and then you drown.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, for what's coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everything. This game is very good about repeating its imagery and layering it with things that will make sense later. But yeah, it's kind of a classic chase scene. She's kind of, what would you even call it? Like that skitter walking. Like she's walking
crawling.
and then she
she
warps forward and then she stops and shakes and then warps forward. So there's a good sense of tension, I would say. Her making terrible noises behind you. You have to kind of keep running. If you turn around and look at her, she will catch up to you. You're just kind of going down doors over and over and over again until you find the right combination of doors to get away. And then once you get away, she turns kind of back into her regular human form and walks out on you, which I think it's pretty apropos that this patriarchal, very superstitious man would be most terrified of his wife, undermining his sense of respect and self-worth. Like, that's the most horrifying thing in this world, is her and what her leaving means to him. So I think they do a good job there. Like, the monster isn't Pyramid Head, it's a wife who respects herself enough to leave.
I feel like having her be this spooky ghost thing, it's not bad. I do think that having her, the realization that she is still alive, kind of felt like, oh, I thought I was being haunted by a spooky ghost this whole time. I don't know what to think about that, but it's more about what the husband is going through than, any actual, like, spooky ghosts are haunting this apartment.
Yeah, and that's something that this game, I think, more than a lot of the horror games that I've played, this game gives way fewer fucks about the how everything is happening, as much as the why. So, like, a lot of games will go into extreme detail to explain, Silent Hill, well, there was a cult, and then the cult called down this deity, and then the deity caused Silent Hill to happen. And every Silent Hill game, we need to go into the background of why this person's being haunted by Silent Hill stuff. Except for 2. 2 doesn't care about the how as much. It mostly cares about the why. And that's why that's the best one. So this game, we never get a sense of, is this a ghost, right? Is Du Fengyu being haunted by a ghost? Is Du Fengyu alive? Is this hell? Is he trapped in an actual physical space? Is this in his mind? Is it some sort of psychosis representation that is oh so common in horror video games? The game never, that I saw, I don't know if either of you noticed, it never tries to explain why this is happening to him.
No, I mean, the closest it comes is there's like a little scene in the epilogue where he's just sort of sitting there looking at a TV screen while it plays static. Which to me would imply that it is in his head, but that's connecting a lot of dots that might not necessarily warrant connecting.
Yeah, and if it's, left up to the player kind of to interpret, if this is a spiritual punishment, if it is a psychological break, I think that that's a good place to leave this, because this game is so much more interested in why Du Fengyu, like, what did he do, right? And how it destroyed this family, rather than, is there some sort of deity that's punishing him or something? Like, Detention got into the how and the why. And that's why it was such a good game in a lot of ways, because once you found out the how, it was heartbreaking. But this game is solely focused on kind of keeping you in this house, in this family, understanding what went down. So once the wife leaves, she walks out on you, you end up in a new place for the first time, the apartment of Mentor Heyu, it would appear. It's a even dingier apartment than the apartment you've been walking around in, and that one's haunted, sometimes with, like, light bulbs that are eyeballs. And in this space, you find a couple of things that are alarming. Did either of you find the tape of the testimonies?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's just say that it doesn't really work out for any of her clients.
Yeah, there's clients who are like, I keep paying you money, and my son isn't any better. Well, you just need to keep praying more. My dad, he forgoed chemotherapy because you said he'd get better and he'd survive at least 2 years, and he's dead already. What the hell's going on? But you end up putting on this blindfold and entering your mind, the spirit world. It's unclear.
There's like your mentor is talking over this experience you're having, which makes it sound like you're going into your own soul in order to, like, commune with the deity.
Yeah, so you blindfold yourself, and then at the end when you come out of it, there seems to be like an empty bowl or saucer of something by your side, which makes me think it's something akin to like an ayahuasca trip.
Yeah, but probably.
Yeah, it doesn't say.
And she walks you through, like, you start out in a room, and then she kind of guides you out and around and, describes the things that you're seeing. Like, you see spirits in punishment, you see bodies on fire on, like, a river of flame, like a bunch of biblical stuff, until you eventually encounter kind of a door that looks like your bathroom door, and you're led in there, and once you go through, there's kind of I guess before that, there's a cave with stalactites that are pens, because your dude's a writer. And then you end up walking through this bathroom door, basically, but lit up in light. And in this room, you have to make a sacrifice to the deity. Pete, what do you have to sacrifice to get healing for your daughter?
My God. So the order is a little strange, if I'm being perfectly honest. I feel like it's out of order. But you start by gouging out your right eye with I don't know, like a
spoon.
Nice spoon sort of deal. Yeah. And it's horrible. Like, you jam it in there, and then the game makes you, like, wiggle the joystick, or the analog stick, basically.
Yep.
Until
you just keep wiggling.
Yeah, until it pops out. And you're making these sort of guttural moans. It's terrible.
And half of your vision goes away on the screen.
It does come back eventually. But the next one... Yeah.
I do wonder why it even comes back, because it seems like it should just have been like that for the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Or at least the rest of the trip.
Yeah.
But your vision does come back. The next one is, and I'm not even sure if this is like anatomically possible, but you like you get these two hooks and you hook your tongue, and then you rip your tongue out. Like, just with like sheer force of yanking. Which, like, I don't know how tongues work, but that doesn't seem possible. I feel like you'd rip through the tongue.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got enough force of yanking, what can't you get done? Am I right?
I guess that's a good point.
And
then the last one, which the last one seems like the least horrible to me, which makes me think it's out of order. But you take a pair of scissors and you stab it through your hand to offer your blood to the demon. And it's all just terrible. It's all horrible. And like the fact that you have to wiggle the analog stick or like yank it down just makes it so much worse.
Yeah. So after that, you kind of awaken in this, you're still in this dingy apartment. I think it's maybe at this point that you find the tape that says, hey, she's a fucking fraud. But she tells you that, okay, you've made this spiritual sacrifice. So I don't believe that Du Fengyu ripped out his tongue and gouged out his eye. I don't think. I think it happened on his ayahuasca trip, and he's not actually maimed himself. But we don't know. He never speaks again after this happens. So, interpretation. Left up to interpretation. But you hear that you need to get this checklist of items to prepare a spiritual bath to purify Du Mei Xin because she's possessed. That's the cause of her illness. So you need to get wine. You need to get a snake. Like some sacred herbs and stuff to throw in with the wine, and you need to brew it, and then you're going to need to put your daughter in a bathtub with this wine for as long as it takes for her to be purified of the evil spirits.
Which, like, how do you know?
So as you walk back to your apartment after this encounter, you, like, over a few phone calls, you hear Du Fengyu talking to the spiritual guide about how to do this. And the first call is like, she doesn't seem to be better. And she's like, oh, it's, it hasn't been that long. Second one's like, I don't think that she's better. The healer's like, well, it could take up to 7 days. Make sure that she's locked in there with the wine and that she's in the tub and locked in there. And then the third call, she doesn't pick up.
Yeah, she basically says, like, look, you're going to hear her screaming, but, like, you just got to ignore that. Ride it out.
That's just the demon leaving her. Don't worry about that.
The screams mean it's working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you get home, and it's a normal apartment when you get home. Well, I mean, it's still fucked up, because he doesn't take care of his apartment. But it's not, there aren't ghostly things happening. There's just trash everywhere. And the only door that you can enter is the bathroom door, and once you open the bathroom door, there's just a white light and lotuses kind of blooming. And then you kind of go on a walk as Du Mei Xin kind of talks about the things that she wanted to do in life. And it kind of explodes out into this big crescendo. I thought that the ending was great. Like the visual display and the music.
Yeah, you sort of chase your daughter across these, like, basically verdant fields. It's all very sort of beautiful. You end up at a playground, but you never quite catch her. And at the very end, she sort of turns around and then everything, fades to black. It is, like, a gorgeous, and, like, the fact that it's actually uplifting makes it all the more crushing. You know what I mean? If it were just horrible, like, you walk in there and, like, you see her body in the tub, that'd be one thing. But to have all this like hope and know it's ultimately fruitless, and fruitless because it's your fault, is all the more poignant.
Yeah, this is a game about one man destroying his family, just through pigheadedness, and by being tricked and buying into a literal snake oil salesman. But yeah, the fact that they end the game with kind of showing a burst of the light that this child believed in, like kind of all, like there are big pinwheels and a lot of iconography that shows kind of a child's imagination, and showing that all and knowing what it probably actually means is that she's passed away. It's crushing, like you said, Pete. And that's kind of how it ends. So, yeah. Pete, what were your takeaways? You don't usually play horror games like this, and I know you had mixed feelings coming in. How did you feel about Devotion?
I mean, I think the ending was probably the only way it could have ended, given the trajectories of all the characters. It kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, I think, just because I don't really gravitate towards these sort of like really dark and dismal stories like this, where it's basically leading to catastrophe. So I think the ending was a generous way to put it. I think if I had opened the door and it was just like a dead body in a bathtub.
Oops, dead kids.
Yeah. I think that would have just been like, well, here we are. So I'm glad they didn't do that, but I also don't feel like they did very much more than that. I was half expecting at the end of the credits there would be that turnaround, and then it would just like smash cut to kid body in a bathtub. So I was like, I don't know about all this. It's like it's something my mother always says is like, isn't the world horrible enough as it is without making like artwork that is also pretty terrible? I know that we are exploring like the evil that men do, but goddamn.
Pete, what did you think?
I'm sympathetic to M's position. Like, this game made me think about true crime documentaries or other documentaries I've watched. Like, one very famous one I saw in New York was The Act of Killing, about an Indonesian genocide. And my thought with like films like that, with pieces like that, are always like, there needs to be something just beyond the horribleness. Like, the fact that a terrible thing happened isn't enough to base a work of art around. You know what I mean? So in that sense, I'm sympathetic with M's position. But I do think in this case that there was like enough of that extra, you know what I mean, to sort of not justify, but to, let's say, elevate the horribleness. So I mean, I was intrigued by all of that. The final like thought I ended with was, so like the husband's obviously the villain here, I guess, if there is a villain, or maybe the mentor is. But you know, there's a certain sympathy for him. I remember reading a lot of books about the history of autism in graduate school, and a lot of it was like very sort of sympathetic, or let's say understanding of sort of anti-vax parents, or like parents who try things like heavy metal chelation or other sort of very experimental treatments. That they're like, look, they're just sort of grasping at straws here. Like, they obviously love their children in their way, and they're just trying to do the best they can for them. I don't know if you can necessarily say that about the father here, but I think it is a question worth asking. Like, how much and in what way does he love his daughter?
Yeah, and I mean, my takeaway from this largely is that this game is much more about the many. It presents you with all of these off-ramps where the father could have realized that his worldview was the mistake. Like, all of the things that he was facing, were he to change himself even a little bit, would have been avoidable. But because he was much... Sorry. But because he was much more comfortable believing in this faith healer and relegating his, like, turning aside his wife's concerns, not listening to any sort of interventions that were performed by her, listening to his daughter and what she was saying directly to him, like, a lot of the terrible things that happened, were he just slightly more open-minded, would have been avoided. So the game, in a lot of cases, like, it shows you where it's going, but it shows you all of these other spots where if the culture was different, if he was different, if, you know, someone intervened in a slightly different way or phrased something slightly differently, everything changes for his story and for his daughter and for his wife. So this game read much more as a critique of a patriarchal family structure in some cases, of kind of superstitious belief in faith healing in general, more than a very specific reproduction of one tragedy, which, you know, there are other games that we've played that have kind of horrible things like that. Like, let's go back to Silent Hill 4. Like, at the end of that game, you're fighting against a demon that you need to fight with, like, it's an umbilical cord, right? You fight it with an umbilical cord?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
Gross.
like, at the end of that game, the takeaway is don't live in a haunted apartment, right? Like, there's not a big lesson. The big enemy is a, like, ghostly psychopath who's trying to kill people via a magical arcane ritual. That's much more of a horror ride. You know, you're there to get scared. Don't think too hard about it. The more you think about it, the less sense it will make. This game, I think the more you think about it, the more you're like, shit, I can see this happening in the real world, and it's textured in a way that makes it much more relatable, and it's making an argument about society in a way that sometimes horror games just don't. Which was why we loved Detention so much. And that's a game you should check out, Em. It's less scary than this game.
Yeah, I haven't played that one, but I've heard good things. It won Game of the Year, so I don't know. Does having the context of Detention help this game? Does it situate it better for you?
They're about very different things. Detention's about an earlier period in Taiwan's history. It's a much more of a period piece. This game feels like it happened in the 80s, but it could have happened at any time to a certain extent. I think that it definitely primes you for Red Candle Games' style of storytelling, because that game also does a lot of, you know, how did this person find themselves in this place? And how did society put them there? Which I think it's of a part. Like, I think Red Candle Games is one of the better horror game developers right now, and I hope that they keep making games to see how their style evolves. But yeah, I think it's worth checking out on its own merits, and it'll resonate. It has a similar style of, you know, finding documents, and those documents giving you fragments of what's going on, and kind of situating this horror tale in folklore to a certain extent. But beyond that, there's not much overlap.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll give it a try.
And speaking of whether Red Candle Games gets to make games anymore, now we can talk the controversy. So this game, Devotion, was very hard to come by for a while, and that is because it was pulled off of Steam after 6 days of being available there in 2019, and then was not republished until 2021, which is why I think we'll have to have a conversation at the end of this about whether this counts as a 2021 Game of the Year or if it's just Game of Our Year. But there was a bit of a controversy because in one of the rooms at one point in this game, there, I guess, was a picture depicting Chinese. What is Xi Jinping's official title now?
General Secretary.
General Secretary.
I mean, they generally try to dissuade you from who's they. I've read that like you don't want to call Xi Jinping president because it sort of normalizes his role, but that might be the official title at least.
The supreme leader of China, Xi Jinping, is depicted at. I guess there's a picture of him looking like Winnie the Pooh, like the Disney character. And apparently the Chinese government does not take kindly to that meme existing to such an extent that they didn't even release Christopher Robin in China.
Why? What? Is this a thing?
Yeah, like when he smiles, he sort of looks like Pooh. So it's sort of a way to, undercut him.
Yeah, it's a meme image. It is a joke, but because of this joke sneaking its way into the game, they basically, Red Candle Games, the game got delisted from Steam. They pulled it themselves, but their publisher in China, like their partner in mainland China, because Red Candle is based out of Taiwan, their publisher in China lost their license to publish games, period, because of publishing this game. So once that happened, they pulled the game from Steam. And they basically got review bombed by a bunch of Chinese gamers because of this. Steam's reviews went from overwhelmingly positive to mostly negative in like a day or two. And then they tried to get published on Good Old Games, the dang it, who are the developers of The Witcher? Because CG Projekt Red runs Good Old Games. They're the free speech people. They were going to release it, and then after hearing, let me find their carefully crafted way of saying that they were not going to publish the game. I think they said after receiving many messages from gamers, we have decided not to list the game in our store. So
the people have spoken.
Oh yeah, totally. Lots of real human beings flooded Good Old Games' website and told them not to publish this game because that's what a lot of real people do. So it was not able to get publishing there. Devotion got a small physical release in Taiwan, but until Red Candle Games created their own store, they could not sell this game. No one would take it. So obviously this brings up large questions about the censorship power of China, kind of holding up their market hostage, like to their whims, and to just how petty the government can be there, like taking down this entire game, basically, and multiple studios that touched it just because it had an image, like it was a piece of placeholder art that someone left in and forgot to remove. It's not even, the game's not even about communism or any critiques of China at all. China's not mentioned.
No, it's very, I mean, to your point, there's really nothing too petty for totalitarianism. Like it's all of a piece with ideological conformity.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess John Oliver was censored on social media after a segment that mentioned the Winnie the Pooh comparisons. Christopher Robin was not released in China. Like there's a bunch of stuff like this. So, and I'm sure that Red Candle Games, being a Taiwanese developer, probably made this even easier of a sell to crack down on them, given the current state of affairs between mainland China and Taiwan.
It would have been curious if they had uncovered something like this in Genshin Impact, just to see what would have happened.
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm sure then we just would have never heard from the studio.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is it sucks that this game had this trouble getting to the store. It also sucks that many of the different sales platforms would not even carry this game. Like basically, I would assume that Steam and Good Old Games probably looked at the Chinese market and said, well, is this one game worth giving up the Chinese market? And they all said no. And that calculus has played itself out across a number of different realms.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's the exact same thing that happened with the NBA and Daryl Morey, where it sort of cracked their veneer of social progressive There are progressive tendencies when they're like, oh, do we support Taiwan or do we kowtow to China? Oh, how many billions? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
I think it was Hong Kong at the time.
Oh, excuse me. I apologize. You're right.
Yeah, and Daryl Morey, when he tweeted out about Hong Kong, I think even LeBron James was like, Daryl's tweeting about things he doesn't know about, which, like, LeBron's a fairly progressive figure, or at least he tends to portray himself that way. And yeah, that the power of billions of people's dollars being available is something that is being wielded in a way that even direct physical coercion cannot be. Like, Chinese government might not be able to come crack down directly on films being made or what people are saying, but they can threaten to not let you into their market, and that's enough for a lot of places, which is a scary thing to think about. So with that, I think that covers everything for Devotion. Pete, it is now
uplifting note to end on.
For a very uplifting game, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, after a game about the tragic failings of a patriarch, let's talk about a little bit about just creeping totalitarianism. And with that, Pete, it's your pick.
Ooh, okay. Creeping totalitarianism. So I'm going to get with a let's call it a little bit of a palate cleanser here. This game's a little bit lighter, a little more straightforward, and we haven't played a puzzler in a while.
Ooh.
So I can remember. I mean, this one had a couple puzzles, but it's not a puzzle game. So I'm going to pick The Pedestrian for my next choice.
The Pedestrian, you say? Is this on the PC?
Yes, it's on Steam. So basically, you are one of the little cartoons that's on street signs, and you have to navigate across all these signs in this bustling city environment.
Oh, this looks adorable.
Yeah, right?
Oh, look at that.
Just a little guy.
It's by Skookum.
Mm-hmm.
Skookum.
I don't think there's going to be any totalitarianism in this game, but we will find out.
Oh, no. That's what it was about all along. The streets in Hong Kong, and it just gets violenter and violenter.
Oh, no.
The only drawback of this game that I can notice so far is where they have their call-out reviews, their little quotes, and one of them is by Jacksepticeye, which makes me want to not play it, but I'll overlook that.
I don't know who that is. Do I want to know who that is?
He's a YouTube personality.
Oh, no.
There's another review from Markiplier, which is just, whoa, that's cool. What? That's so cool. What the heck? Whoa.
Yeah, which really sums up.
End of quote.
It really sums up Markiplier's whole vibe.
Awesome. Well, next up we will be playing The Pedestrian. So, normal housekeeping, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Send in your emails and tell us what would you want to see on our Patreon? What would you like to see us do in terms of future content? We're looking for feedback, y'all. Reach out. And you can also support the show, patreon.com/deeplistens. And thank you. We actually have a new patron, so thank you for supporting the show.
Thank you.
Many thanks.
M.
Thank you. Hopefully this will be my one horror game for the year. Maybe we'll revisit the horror games around Halloween time.
Halloween.
As we want to do. But yeah, if any game is going to get us taken off of Spotify in China, it'd be this one. So let's see how we do.
It's okay. Before I picked this game, I looked at our map, and very few hits in China.
Nice.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
We have more people listening in Russia than in China.
We'll probably get censored.
Shout out to the Russians.
We already played Papers, Please. We let that one by.
Shout outs to all two of you. How are you listening to this? Right in. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, Gino, you already said it, but Devotion's a cool game. It's worth checking out. I would recommend it to anyone who is a fan of the genre.
Yeah, and to our Taiwanese listeners, write in if you think we did a good job, if this game was good. I'd love to hear from you. We do have listeners in Taiwan, apparently. So yeah, thanks everyone. Till next time. Peace.